With me today is John Dofflemyer. He is the author of Poems from Dry Creek. He is a cattle rancher in the Sierra Nevadas. And John, the first question I'm going to ask you is cattle ranching and poetry?
Well, I think that makes more sense to me than anything. I'm in the landscape's really an important part of my poetry anyway, and I see something new every day, and I can. I've been there so long, the landscape's part of me, and I have a tendency to see things through the animal's eyes, the cattle's eyes, the horse's eyes, and go so far as to see it through the trees and the birds and the rest of it. And the metaphors are just hanging there waiting to be used.
Okay. Now, do you write poetry every day?
Yeah, I'm pretty disciplined. I get up early every morning, and from about 3:30 or 4 o'clock till about 7 o'clock is my time, and that's the time I spend writing.
Now, you have a wonderful section in the back of this book where you talk about some of the poems. And in one of them you mentioned that writing a poem is your way of remembering a particular moment. Is that true about all of your poetry?
I think that I do a lot of trying to capture the moment in a poem, and which tends to be more of a reflective exercise in that you're trying to recall that moment and pulling on different images to try to capture that moment. And of course it's a moment that is significant to you, you as the poet. And so it's my way of maybe remembering, landmarking those moments, and if I'm lucky enough for it to turn into a poem, great. But a lot of what I write probably never sees the light of day, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have talked with a lot of writers, poets, and novelists, and so on, and they say the hardest part is editing out the stuff that's not quite as good as they'd want it to be.
Yeah, I edit a lot while I write. Surprisingly, it's kind of an awkward process, but I think I do edit as I write, and then of course the editing continues after that. But and then some days you just don't have it, but it's good practice. Yeah. It's a good mental exercise. I really enjoy it, or I wouldn't do it.
Right. Now, I usually ask the poets who come on this show to read a selection of their poetry, so I'll ask you.
The title's I Owe My Soul. Few secrets in a little town. Kids rooming sidewalks after school. Fat, tired Schwinn slung with bags of county history we thought was news. No one felt anonymous. Not even the lean Okie kids from Tullyville who rode the bus with the rest of us. They hated. The older girls claimed the long black seat and brayed gospel songs as the bus filled up. But then someone behind me would always start it to rockin', erupting with Tennessee Ernie Ford 16 tons. Lyrics you could see before they got off at the company store. 3 dirt streets of clapboard shacks with broke down wrecks looking out so helplessly that we all sang along.
Now, you incorporate pieces of songs from a lot of your poetry, don't you?
I might. I hadn't thought about it that. But yeah, I love song lyrics, and there's some good ones out there. So a lot of the late 60s kind of anti-establishment lyrics that took place then, I think there was another folk connection, a rural connection that took place in that point in time. I don't think too many people were too cognizant of that at the time, but there was a kind of a musical revolution at that point in time, and I was away at school a lot. I went away to high school. I was in an urban setting in Southern California during college, and the folk lyrics and even my own writing kind of kept me grounded with my upbringing, my rural upbringing, and so it's only natural, that after I got out of school and ended up back home, that kept writing poetry, and it's been a big part, special part of my life that it's certainly not my main interest, but it goes on as we're trying to make a living.
Right.
Raising cattle.
Right. Now, your family has been in that area on that land really since shortly after the gold rush, haven't they?
Yeah, my mother's great-grandfather showed up in 1852 in Tulare County, and first judge, elected judge. Yeah, the family's got a history there.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think that's affected your poetry?
Well, I think I've got a responsibility to the generations before me to try to preserve a culture and a way of life, and communicate a way of life. I think to an urban majority that doesn't quite understand what we're doing. We're not quite the spoilers of the landscape that a lot of people think we are.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would suggest most urban people don't know which end of a cow to avoid.
Well, yeah, I think that's true enough,
But I think you've done a beautiful job of preserving the culture, but particularly, I think, the landscape, the environment that you talk about, and this morning pause, when you talk about the speed of light, the seasons of change, went to hot and dry to cold again. Things like that, I think, really evoke nature and a particular place in the Sierra Nevada.
Thank you.
And obstacles, was there a particular reason why you wrote about boulders in dry creek beds?
Yeah, once in a while we have our good days and our bad days, and I think sometimes we need to look at our obstacles as something other than obstacles. Mm-hmm. And they really truly are. I think the hard times are what bring out the best in us, and that's basically what that poem's about. Those are the times we cherish.
Right. Afterwards.
Exactly, not during. That's just to get you there during a little quicker.
Right. Or at least to keep you going.
That poem's written for me to remember.
Right.
And once again, I think most of the poetry is pretty personal, and mm-hmm. I'm just very tickled that it works for someone else.
Mm-hmm. Well, it has that quality that I think is art, which is the personal. It has to be personal. You have to put yourself into it, but it needs to be universal enough that other people can say, "Oh, I've felt that way," or "I've felt a little bit that way," and I think you've succeeded in doing that.
I hope that I've the sense of humanity, that we're all human beings, mm-hmm. regardless of who we are or what color we are or what we do for a living, that deep down inside we're all human beings, and we have that in common. And especially in these political times, these divisive times, maybe a glance in that direction would help us all.
Well, I hope so too. And I want to thank you very much for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
John Dofflemyer has been here talking about his collection of poetry, Poems from Dry Creek. It's the Wrangler Award winner for 2009. You can find it in your library and your favorite bookstore.